Welcome to Heartline Stories. Today we bring you an unbelievable tale of a millionaire whose life turns upside down after meeting his new employee's 7-year-old son. A single conversation opens the door to long-buried truths, hidden connections, and a past he never knew existed. What could be so extraordinary about this boy and his family that it shakes the very foundation of a powerful man's life? Stick around as the story unfolds in ways you won't see coming. Let us know where you're watching from in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that touch the heart. Logan Carter was a man with everything. He lived in a giant house with tall glass windows, had fast cars parked in his garage, and wore the finest suits money could buy. Logan was a millionaire, but he didn't have much time for anything other than work. One sunny morning, Logan decided to hire a new driver. Driving himself had become exhausting, and he thought a chauffeur could save him time. That's when he met Brian, a man in his late 30s with kind eyes and a warm smile. Brian wasn't dressed fancy, but he spoke politely and seemed honest. Logan hired him on the spot. Days passed, and Brian was great at his job. He always arrived on time, knew the best routes in the city, and never complained about anything. But one thing puzzled Logan. Every day at exactly 3:45 p.m., Brian asked for a short break. No matter what they were doing, he would park the car and step away. At first, Logan didn't mind, but after a week, his curiosity got the better of him. "What's so important that you leave at the same time every day?" Logan finally asked. Brian hesitated, scratching his head. It's, it's personal, sir," he replied softly. "I can't explain right now." Logan's curiosity only grew. One afternoon, he decided to follow Brian. After parking the car in their usual spot, Brian hurried into a small park nearby. Logan stepped out of the car and watched from a distance. In the middle of the park stood a little boy with curly brown hair, holding a worn-out soccer ball. His clothes were simple and had a few patches, but his smile was as bright as sunshine. Brian knelt down, gave the boy a hug, and they started playing soccer together. Logan couldn't believe his eyes. "Brian has a son?" he murmured to himself. The scene warmed Logan's heart in a way he hadn't felt in years. He remembered his own childhood, back when his dad used to play catch with him in their backyard. But that memory quickly faded, replaced by the lonely feeling he had carried since his father passed away. When Brian returned to the car, Logan asked, "Why didn't you tell me about your son?" Brian looked surprised. "I didn't think it was important to share, sir," he said quietly. "His name is Caleb, and he's my world. I work hard so I can give him a better life." Logan thought about Brian's words for a moment. "Why don't you bring Caleb to my house this weekend? I'd like to meet him," Logan offered. Brian's face lit up with a mix of surprise and gratitude. Little did Logan know, the meeting with Caleb would uncover an incredible truth that would change all their lives forever. The following Saturday, Brian arrived at Logan's mansion with Caleb in tow. Caleb's eyes grew wide as he took in the towering house, with its shiny windows and a fountain that sparkled in the sunlight. "Whoa, Dad," he whispered. "Is this a castle?" Brian chuckled, patting Caleb on the shoulder. "Not quite, buddy. Just be polite, okay?" Logan opened the door himself, something he rarely did. "Welcome, Brian. And you must be Caleb," he said, smiling warmly. "Yes, sir," Caleb answered, standing up straight like he was in the presence of a king. Logan couldn't help but smile at the boy's enthusiasm. Come in, come in." Logan gestured for them to follow him. Inside, Caleb couldn't believe his eyes. Everything seemed to sparkle. Marble floors, golden picture frames, and even the chandelier hanging high above. "This is the fanciest place I've ever seen," Caleb said quietly, tugging on Brian's sleeve. Logan overheard and laughed gently. "Well, Caleb, a house is just a house. What makes it special is the people in it. Now let's have some fun. Do you like soccer?" "Do I like soccer?" Caleb's face lit up. "It's my favorite thing in the whole world." Logan grinned. "Perfect. Let's head to the backyard. I've got a field out there you might like." When they stepped outside, Caleb's jaw dropped again. Logan's backyard wasn't just a backyard. It was a sprawling green field with perfectly trimmed grass and goalposts on either end. Logan brought out a soccer ball, and soon the three of them were running, kicking, and laughing together. Logan hadn't played like this in years, and he couldn't remember the last time he'd had so much fun. As the sun began to set, Caleb flopped onto the grass, tired but happy. "Mr. Logan, this is the best day ever," he said, beaming. Logan sat down beside him. "I'm glad you had fun, Caleb, but you can just call me Logan, okay?" "Okay, Logan," Caleb replied, grinning. Brian watched the two of them with a strange look on his face, part joy, part something else. "Logan," he began hesitantly, "thank you for today. It means the world to Caleb and to me." Before Logan could respond, Caleb suddenly said, "Hey, Dad, can I tell Logan about Mom?" Brian froze, his smile fading slightly. Logan noticed this and looked between them curiously. "What about your mom?" Logan asked gently. Caleb sat up and hugged his knees. "She always said she wanted me to meet someone like you, Logan. Someone kind who would care about us." Logan blinked, taken aback. "That's very sweet of her," he said softly. "Where is she now?" Brian cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable. She passed away a few years ago," he said quietly. "I'm so sorry to hear that," Logan said, his voice full of genuine sympathy. But before Logan could say more, Caleb spoke again, his voice small but clear. "Dad says I look just like her. Did you know her, Logan?" Logan's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" he asked, his tone suddenly serious. Brian avoided Logan's gaze, his hands gripping the grass tightly. "Caleb, why don't you go wash up inside? There's a bathroom just through those doors," he said, pointing toward the house. Caleb nodded, sensing the change in tone. "Okay, Dad," he said, running off toward the house. Once Caleb was out of earshot, Logan turned to Brian. "Brian, what's going on? Why would Caleb ask if I knew his mom?" Brian took a deep breath, his shoulders tense. "Because, Logan," he began, his voice shaking slightly, "there's something I've been meaning to tell you. Something I should have told you a long time ago." Brian's hands trembled slightly as he sat on the edge of the grass. "Logan, there's a reason I didn't tell you about Caleb's mother right away," he began. It's complicated." Logan furrowed his brow. "Complicated how? What aren't you telling me?" His voice was firm, but not unkind. Brian took a deep breath, clearly wrestling with his thoughts. "Caleb's mom, Grace, she worked in the same city as you, years ago. She spoke about a man, a kind man, who helped her through some tough times. She described him in a way that, well, matches you perfectly." Logan's heart began to race. "Brian, are you saying I knew her?" he asked, his mind flashing through memories of people he had crossed paths with. Brian nodded, his face solemn. "I wasn't sure at first, but the more I worked for you, the more things started adding up. Grace spoke so highly of you, Logan. She said you changed her life." Logan leaned back, trying to process the information. "But if I did know her, why didn't she ever reach out? Why didn't she tell me? Brian looked away, his voice barely a whisper. I think she wanted to protect Caleb. She was proud, Logan. She didn't want anyone's pity. Logan was quiet for a long moment. A wave of emotions washed over him. Confusion, sadness, and a growing curiosity about the woman Brian was describing. He turned to Brian, his voice steady. Tell me everything you know about Grace. I need to understand. Brian hesitated but then began to speak. Grace was strong, kind, and always put others first. She worked multiple jobs to make sure Caleb had everything he needed. But life wasn't easy for her, Logan. She got sick and she didn't make it. His voice broke slightly and he quickly cleared his throat. Logan felt a lump form in his throat. She sounds like an incredible woman, he said softly. And Caleb, he must have her strength. Brian smiled faintly. He does. He's the best part of her, Logan. At that moment, Caleb came running back outside, his face glowing with excitement. Logan, your house has so many rooms. I didn't even know where the bathroom was at first, he said, laughing. Logan managed to smile, though his mind was still spinning. I'm glad you found it, buddy, he replied warmly. As Caleb sat down between them, Logan glanced at Brian, silently conveying that their conversation wasn't over. Logan couldn't shake the feeling that there was still more to the story, more truths waiting to be uncovered, truths that might connect his past to Brian's and Caleb's in ways he never imagined. The next few days weighed heavily on Logan's mind. He couldn't stop thinking about Caleb's question and Brian's hesitance to reveal more about Grace. Something about the story tugged at Logan's memories, as though he was on the brink of recalling something important, but couldn't quite grasp it. One morning, Logan called Brian into his study. The room was filled with books, awards, and photographs from Logan's successful career, but Brian's attention was focused entirely on his employer. Brian, Logan began, leaning forward in his chair, I need you to be honest with me. Grace, did I ever meet her? Is there something I should know about her and Caleb? Brian looked uneasy, shifting from one foot to the other. Logan, it's not that I don't want to tell you. It's just, it's hard to explain without Caleb hearing. He glanced at the door, as if making sure the boy wasn't nearby. But I think you have a right to know. Grace spoke about you so often. She said you were the reason she believed in kindness, even when things were tough. Logan's heart ached at the thought. Please, Brian, I need to know. Did she ever mention my name? Did we ever cross paths? Brian hesitated, then finally nodded. She did. She said your name more than once, actually. But the thing is, Logan, she never wanted to ask for help. She admired you too much to feel like she was taking anything from you. Logan sat back, stunned. Brian, I don't even know what to say. If I had known, if she needed help, I would have been there for her. Why didn't she come to me? Brian lowered his head. I think she thought you had enough on your plate. She didn't want to burden you, especially with Caleb being so young. Logan was silent for a moment, processing everything. Caleb deserves to know about his mom's connection to me. And Brian, I think I owe it to both of you to figure this out. Brian met Logan's eyes, a flicker of hope in his expression. What are you going to do? Logan stood up, his mind now made up. I'm going to find out everything I can about Grace. There has to be more to this story, and if she trusted me, then I'll do everything I can to honor that trust. As Logan spoke, Caleb appeared in the doorway, holding a sketch pad. What are you guys talking about? He asked, tilting his head curiously. Logan smiled at the boy. Just grown-up stuff, Caleb. But I was about to ask you something. Can you tell me what you remember most about your mom? Caleb's face lit up as he sat down on the edge of Logan's desk. Mom? Oh, she was awesome. She used to tell me bedtime stories, and she made the best peanut butter sandwiches. She always said that no matter how tough things got, we should look for the good in people. Logan felt a lump form in his throat again. Caleb's words only deepened his resolve to uncover the full truth about Grace and her connection to him. Caleb, Logan said gently, how about we spend more time together? Maybe we can share stories about your mom, and I can tell you some of mine. Caleb grinned from ear to ear. Really? That sounds amazing. Brian watched the exchange quietly, his expression unreadable. But deep down, he knew that this moment marked the beginning of something bigger, a journey that would bring them all closer together and reveal truths none of them could have imagined. Over the next few days, Logan found himself lost in thought more often than not. He couldn't shake the feeling that he had known Grace and that there was something vital he had forgotten. Determined to uncover the truth, he decided to visit an old friend, Eleanor, a retired journalist who had always had a knack for uncovering hidden stories. Logan met Eleanor at her cozy home, surrounded by stacks of newspapers and photo albums. Logan Carter, Eleanor exclaimed as he walked in. What brings you here? Last time we spoke, you were too busy to even take a phone call. Logan chuckled sheepishly. You're not wrong, Eleanor, but I need your help. I think this is a story I missed, and it's connected to a woman named Grace and her son Caleb. I need to know if I ever cross paths with her. Eleanor raised an eyebrow. Grace, you say? Do you have a last name? Any details about her? Logan shook his head. Brian, my driver, told me she admired me and that I might have helped her in the past. But beyond that, I don't have much to go on. I know it's not much, but if anyone can dig up something, it's you. Eleanor tapped her chin thoughtfully. It's not much, but I've worked with less. Leave it to me, Logan. If there's anything to find, I'll find it. Logan left Eleanor's house feeling a glimmer of hope. Meanwhile, back at home, Caleb was growing more comfortable around Logan. The boy's laughter echoed through the mansion as he explored every nook and cranny, always bubbling with questions. One evening, as Caleb and Logan were sitting on the sofa flipping through an old photo album, Caleb pointed to a picture of Logan when he was younger. Logan, you look so different here, Caleb exclaimed, grinning. Logan smiled. Yeah, I was about your age in that picture. Life was simpler back then. Caleb tilted his head, studying the photo closely. You know, you kinda look like my mom used to. She had the same eyes as you. Logan froze for a moment, his heart skipping a beat. Really? He asked carefully. Caleb nodded. Yeah. Mom always said people with kind eyes are the best kind of people. Before Logan could say anything more, Brian walked into the room, carrying a tray of snacks. He noticed the photo album and gave Logan a cautious look. Caleb, time to wash up for dinner, Brian said gently. Okay, Dad, Caleb said, hopping off the sofa and running to the bathroom. As soon as Caleb was out of earshot, Logan turned to Brian. Brian, Caleb just said I have the same eyes as Grace. Do you think that means something? Brian hesitated, setting the tray down on the coffee table. Logan, I don't know what it means, but maybe it's time we stop wondering and start finding answers. Just then, Logan's phone buzzed. It was a message from Eleanor. Logan, I've found something. You need to see this. Logan's pulse quickened as he read the message. He looked up at Brian, determination in his eyes. I think we're about to get some answers, he said. Logan's heart raced as he drove to Eleanor's home to hear what she had discovered. Brian had chosen to stay behind with Caleb, but it was clear that he too was anxious for answers. Logan couldn't shake the feeling that whatever Eleanor had found would change everything. When he arrived, Eleanor greeted him with a thick folder in hand. "This is what I've uncovered, Logan," she said, her expression serious. Logan sat down and opened the folder. Inside were old letters, photographs, and a birth certificate. His hands trembled as he sifted through the documents. One photograph, in particular, caught his attention. It was a picture of Grace, smiling brightly while holding a newborn baby. "She mentioned your name several times in her journal," Eleanor explained. "She wrote about how you helped her once when she was at her lowest point. She believed in kindness because of you." Logan's eyes welled up as he read Grace's words. Memories began flooding back. Years ago, he had indeed helped a young woman named Grace, who had come to his office seeking assistance. At the time, she had been struggling to make ends meet, and Logan had offered her a small loan to get back on her feet. He hadn't thought much of it then, but to Grace it had meant the world. But the most shocking revelation came when Logan looked at the birth certificate. His breath caught in his throat as he read the name listed under "Father." It was his. Logan sat back in his chair, stunned. "Eleanor, Caleb is my son," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Eleanor nodded, her face softening. "It appears so. Grace must have decided not to tell you, perhaps because she didn't want to disrupt your life. But now, Logan, you have a chance to be a part of Caleb's life in a way you never expected." Logan's mind raced as he thought of Caleb, the boy's bright smile, his curious questions, and the way he reminded Logan of himself as a child. He realized that he had a responsibility, not just to honor Grace's memory, but to be the father Caleb deserved. When Logan returned home, Brian and Caleb were waiting for him. Caleb ran up to him with his usual enthusiasm. "Logan, did you find anything out?" Logan knelt down and placed a hand on Caleb's shoulder. "I did, Caleb, and I found out something very special. Can we sit down for a talk?" Brian's expression was a mixture of apprehension and understanding as they all sat in the living room. Logan took a deep breath and looked Caleb in the eye. "Caleb, there's something I need to tell you. It's about your mom and me." Caleb tilted his head, curious. "What about her?" Logan smiled gently. "Your mom was one of the most amazing people I've ever met. And it turns out, I'm not just your friend. Caleb, I'm your dad." The room went silent for a moment as Caleb processed Logan's words. Then tears welled up in his eyes and he flung his arms around Logan's neck. "You're my dad?" he whispered. "Yes, Caleb," Logan said, his voice thick with emotion. "And I promise to be here for you, always." Brian watched the scene with tears in his own eyes. "Grace would be so happy," he said softly. From that day forward, their lives changed in ways none of them could have imagined. Logan, Caleb, and Brian became a family, not bound by blood alone, but by love, trust, and the incredible truth that had brought them together. And with that, the story reaches its heartfelt conclusion. I hope it resonated with you and your vision. Let me know if you'd like to build another story.